musician.
Claro que sí. Yes, he was. Yes.
So I wanted to ask you a lot of things, but the first one is, how do you see the embodiment of music in salsa today? For example, where you are, do you feel or do you see that people really embody the music, or that is something when people say musicality, or that they are dancing from their mind, so to speak? Do you think they really feel it in the body?
Well, I will be diplomatic, but also straight and as short as I can. I give respect to anybody who wants to dance to Afro-Cuban music. I think it's wonderful. A child can do it. You can see a child and they'll just start moving their body, and we can't say that the child isn't feeling the music. He is, or she is. I know that there are foreigners who think that Ricky Martin is salsa, that Mark Anthony, is Afro-Cuban music. That's what people think. So we can't deny what they feel. However, on the other side of that coin, I do think that when you go into the festival world, and I think it's important to separate that, you have the natural world and the festival world. The festival world, as you know, we have our figures, we have the techniques that we need to do. You keep the elbow in when you're doing your turn. The girl has to raise her hand outside of the inside turn, all of that. And those are the techniques that go to the teaching. For festival dancers, they're feeling something, but I don't think that the majority of them are actually listening to the music. I think that they're hearing 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, or whatever it is that they're dancing. I don't know that they're really feeling the music and dancing according to the musical changes. And when I say feel the music, I'm speaking specifically about changing when the music changes. And that's my answer. So it depends on which way you go.
Yeah, and what about, I mean, based on that takes me to my second question. I teach, personally, I've been teaching with live music, and I teach from the music since, I don't know, the 90s, because I'm a musician as well. I'm very interested in this connection between the dancer and the music, that is inseparable. But obviously a lot of people teach only with the count. For me, the count is another tool. It's not the only tool. It's a tool, the same as imagery, the same as other words that I might use, like step, step, step. So what about you? I know you teach with music too, so I guess you believe it's important, but how important do you think is to teach with live music, or teach music, salsa music, to people that are not from that background and want to learn to dance salsa? Do you think it's important?
For me, I think it is absolutely fundamental. And what I do here, and what I've done at many of the festivals at which I've taught around the world, is every organizer who has hired me, for the most part, unless it was the bigger festivals like Istanbul or New York, sadly not New York, but or Croatia, they just, for some reason, they're not really interested in that kind of stuff. But usually the smaller events where they have a budget that is very centered, they only invite a certain amount of people, they're the ones who invest in the instruments. And those classes, I've got to say, those are the best classes. When you have a contrabajista, estoy en las congas, pianista, guitarrista, and then trompetista or trombonista, however you want. And then you get the students to do the clave with the clave, you do with the guiro and the maracas, and you fill them in and you dance and you dance. And especially when you teach the breaks, because that's what most dancers miss. They miss the breaks. And when you teach this to live music, and you can hear, this is the contrabass, this is what you're dancing. And when you hear the contrabass do this, it means it's a 2-3 clave. And when you hear that 2-3 clave, if you want your feet connected to the clave, connected to the music, this is how you dance. And if you want your feet to connect in a way that helps your upper body to feel connected to whatever it is, instrument you want to play, then you dance on one, and you dance salsa on two, and you do your thing. Those are the best classes. I think that live music is fundamental. I don't think it should be the very first class that dancers take because not everybody's going to be interested. But I think that after a couple of classes and they start getting the basic movements of how to step, then introducing that music and then they can dance to it, that's great. Absolutely.
Oh, nice. And also in your experience, a combination of teaching with the music and teaching with the count is your approach?
What I usually do, because I dance very uniquely. I don't dance strictly salsa on two. Of course, I know how to dance salsa on two. I prefer to dance power on two. So by dancing power on two, I'm teaching dancers the 3 ways, which are among the 5. So I start with power on two because that is completely connected to the music. I'm sorry?
What do you mean by power on two?
In the United States, some people call it the Puerto Rican style. So 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Son, but in line.
I didn't know. It was called power on two.
Yeah, well, we call it power on two. Some people call it palladium on two or Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican, I know that's Puerto Rican.
If you go to Miami, and if you meet any Jewish people, they're dancing power on two. That's their dance because they dance the palladium like that.
Yeah.
So that is the first dance that I get people to do because it is so connected to the music and it helps them to really feel the bass. And then, of course, salsa on two, just because it's commercial and that's what everybody's doing.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. Yeah, I do the same. I teach first on congas, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and then I teach editors 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 2, 3, and 6, 7 on the 8 and 4 and. What other styles you think there are then? Those 3 and then clave?
Then of course I introduce cubana, then we do son, and then of course on one. And then bolero. Bolero is fundamental. So I always teach bolero as well so that they know what's going on with bachata. And I do son so that they understand what semba and kizomba are doing. So I cover all of it.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So you believe that for them it is important to learn all the different styles and not just stick to one?
Oh, I believe it's fundamental because it gives you know what I do with it? Some instructors get worried about it, but I just say the truth. I say, listen, if you're dancing here in this local community, it doesn't matter. Dance whatever you want. You got to dance salsa on two because that's what everybody's doing. But if you ever go to a festival, you better learn how to dance all these other styles because you're going to meet people who are not from Poland or not from whatever city I'm teaching in. And at international festivals, you're going to meet people from all over the world. And it would be great to be versatile, not only in what another dancer dances, but also what the music is telling us what to do. And then they get inspired and they see the reason for dancing it.
Yeah, I teach the same way. And also because I believe, because through research, my research, one of the first things I realized when I moved to New York in 2000 was that people were counting 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, but they weren't dancing 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. They were dancing on conga, sometimes on the one. So it's like these styles, these timings, what now they call contratiempo, which is song timing, and they're interchangeable within the song because it also has to do on how big your steps are and to what instrument you are actually stepping. So even within one song, they change from one to the other. So I think these strict rules are not very real. It's not a reality. I had this conversation with some very famous dancers and they said, no, I dance 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. And I showed them a video of themselves dancing on 8 and 4. And they were like, oh, yeah, I do. I said, yeah, of course you do, because it would be unnatural. You can't stay 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 the whole song. It just won't physically happen when there's a very strong bass and a strong conga. You will not. You will naturally.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I find that fascinating that you are one of the very few people I've ever talked to that we are. That's why I like the work you do, and I wanted to talk to you. We are very like-minded even though we have a different approach, obviously, naturally, we are very like-minded in what is salsa and this fundamental of people learning to identify also, in my opinion, when they go to a congress, if they understand there are different types of basic, there are different timings, there are different styles, then can learn faster from everybody. Because when they look at a picture, they straight away realize, oh, they're stepping with a push step, like, you know, like Yamule does, or they're doing a editores pure basic. Yeah, so that's my reason behind as well. So facilitate learning. So you think basically that yeah, live music is very important. To learn to play seems important to you as well. Have you seen a difference when people learn to play the basic rhythms?
So are you talking about instruments?
Yes. When they
Right,
dance,
well,
not learn to be musicians, but just learning to play the clave and the guiro and the cowbell. Do you feel that, or in your experience, does that help them embody the
well,
music?
I will answer your question with a little bit of a sense of humor. Not everybody is a musician, and not everybody can hear. they can't even hear themselves. They can't even hear the tempo in themselves. I'm sure you've met people who hold the clave and you go like this, ba 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 ba. They can't even hear themselves, and it's like they can't connect it. So for those who have an inclination to understand tempo inside of their bodies, not just in the mind, but inside of their bodies, then for those, there is great advantage to learning how to play any of the instruments: piano, guitar, clave, maracas. Of course, most of them love or want to be able to play the congas or the bongo if they're doing bachata. So I think it's very valuable for those who have an inclination towards doing that. For those who do not have an inclination towards playing a particular instrument or using their voice as an instrument and singing a song, I find them to be helpful to be put in the backseat driver. That's an American term, to be backseat drivers, where they may not be able to initiate the rhythm, they may not be able to initiate the melodic rhythm, but as long as they have someone to follow, then they feel comfortable doing that. So that is an answer for both of them. Some people just don't have the inclination, and some people do. Those who do, it is excellent for them to learn something. For those who don't, it is excellent for them to follow someone who is clearly leading them, a teacher, a class, and they can still feel it. And this way, they still feel the joy.
Exactly, which is the most important thing, the enjoyment, the being in the moment. And I'll ask you one more question, and then I mean, we can chat just without lead questions. What do you think? I mean, actually, it's two questions in one. One, I'm interested in your perception as a Latino and as a musician in what's happened. And I've been in salsa in the UK since the beginning. So I was the second or third that started. So very, very early, you know, like 91, very long time. So I saw it evolve, you know, and I saw it grow from being in the hands of Latinos that were passing it through to people that learn from people, then that learn from people. And I saw it change. And in England, we have a special case where movements were favored over flavor because of cultural reasons. So what do you think about the phenomenon of salsa internationally? I've asked this question to everybody. Do you perceive some of what's happening as cultural appropriation? Or do you think the culture is being truly respected and passed on properly? Or what could be done for that to continue growing in the right direction, so to speak? In terms of the culture, not in terms of the enjoyment. People are going to enjoy even if they dance salsa to tango. You know, it's not
Of course,
social or psychological side.
I will keep my answer brief, and I will just say this. Culture is an experience. And there are people who may not have it in their blood, but they certainly have love and the ability to adapt in their blood. And they can grow up or be part of a culture. I'm not Polish. I've learned to speak Polish. I'm not European, but I've learned how to live the European way. So when I go back to the United States, even my own siblings, they say, you very Europeanized,
Yeah, same here.
right? So I'm of the European culture, and I'm also of the American culture. Having said that, when it comes to Afro-Cuban music, when it comes to bachata, Afro-Caribbean music, when it comes to kizomba, I think it is extremely important to allow this door to be open to those who can succumb to that culture, and not just it is mine, it is mine, it is mine, because where would Ukraine be if we said these are our weapons? They're not yours. We're not going to let you use them. If you've been to New York, so you understand that in New York, guess what? Especially in the bachata world, every Latino in Jersey, Connecticut, New York, DC, we have the same foundation when it comes to bachata. The same foundation. You go to Jersey, the Mexicans, Salvadoreños, Panameños, los ticos de Costa Rica, los boricanos, los puertorriqueños, cubanos, dominicanos, they're all dancing. The Dominicans are not there saying, ustedes no pueden bailar esta bachata porque es nuestra. No, es nuestra. Los latinos que bailan eso. Pero además, yo conozco a gente de Rusia, de Alemania, de Checa, de Polonia, que viven en Nueva Jersey. I just switched, I'm sorry, that live in Jersey. Que viven en Nueva Jersey, Nueva York, y ellos bailan igual, bailan muy bien porque han pasado mucho tiempo ahí, están comiendo la misma comida que nosotros estamos comiendo, están bebiendo las batidas de guanábana o de mango, lo que sea, están haciendo lo mismo que nosotros. So, no podemos decir, chucha madre, ustedes no son latinos, no pueden comer este arroz con pollo, con habichuelas. Ustedes no bailan así. Bailan. So to answer your question, I think whether it comes to cultural appropriation, that is an opinion that I will leave to the others. I think it is the responsibility and the obligation of anyone who is knowledgeable of a particular tradition or culture to pass it on. Where would I be without Tito Puente and Celia Cruz coming to my house when I was a kid and talking to my father, my mother? I remember a short story for you. I don't want to take your time. I remember one thing that flipped me when I was 11 years old. You would probably remember when everything switched from cassette tapes to CDs. You remember that era? Right? So this is that
I definitely remember.
There you go. So in the United States, that happened in around 1991. That was the year 1990, 1991. If you had a CD, whoa, whoa, that was really cool, right? So I remember there was CDs coming out, and they all said salsa on it. And I grew up with my father saying, eso no es salsa, no hay salsa. I grew up with that. Well, what is salsa? That is a mentality. So I remember Tito Puente was in my living room, Cachao, if you know Cachao, the contrabajista. So Cachao, my father, Xiomara Alfaro from Cuba, and her husband, Rafael Benitez on the piano. And I can't remember who was on the trumpet, but I remember there was another musician there. And they were all there. And it was such an amazing experience because my father was on the bass. He's doom, 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 doom. And Cachao, he would come up and in the middle of the whole thing, they're rehearsing, and he would take the bass from him and say, hey, mira, hijo, déjame enseñarte algo. And he would take the bass and he would start doing. And my father would, coño, ¿qué vaina con esto? And Tito Puente, he would be motivated. And then my father would take the bass and be like, okay, bueno, tócame con eso, siga con esto. And they would just go back and forth with the bass. My hair is standing up. It was an amazing experience. And I was so excited at 11 years old that I just jumped up and said, "Oh, me gusta esta salsa." And Tito Puente stopped the whole thing right there.
Yes.
And he comes up with his finger and he jams it into my collarbone. He says, "Hey, esto no es salsa, esto es un son montuno." He said exactly that. I was just so terrified. I'm wondering why my father's not helping me, because this man with this big afro, this white afro, is yelling at me. And later it was explained to me, what was going on. Then at I think I was like 15, maybe 15, 16, maybe 17. My father and Puente had a big concert down in Danbury in Connecticut. And it was normal routine. My mother was cooking spaghetti and meatballs at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they would come home. Puente would sleep at the house, and then in the morning he would go if he was too tired. And there was this one morning they both come in. My father was carrying his bass, and I was awake. And Puente was so sad, and he just came in with his long face and his sticks, and he comes in and he says, "These people." That's all he said. "These people." And my mother said, "What happened? What people?" I said, "These people. I don't understand these people." So my mother's like, "Oh, there must have been an argument. There must have been some kind of fight. And where's Alfonso? My father. And he's coming." And my father comes in with his bass and he puts it down. He says, "Esta gente." So my mother's like, "What people? What happened?" And they're coming in and they come into the kitchen and Puente looks at my father y says, "Tú puedes creer esta gente? ¿Cómo son esta gente?" And my father's like, "Yo no entiendo esta gente." And my mother says, "What happened?" And then Puente, he takes his sticks and he throws them on the kitchen floor and he goes, "I don't understand these people. I'm playing one thing, but they're dancing another." And he was so upset that they weren't feeling, what this was. And my father, he says, "Bueno, si esto es lo que ellos quieren, that it rains upon them." And I'll never forget that experience, that I grew up with listening to the music before it went into the recording studio. And I would listen. Puente would dance, and he was playing. He was dancing to his own music. My father would dance to their own music being played. And the last thing I'll tell you, 1987, nope, 1986, I was 8. I was 8 years old. I met Machito only one time. If you know who Machito was, I met him only one time. But I heard the story. Do you know the famous song, Sopa de Pinchón? Tiene que tomar esta sopa de pichón, son montuno. Well, my father told me the story that he was there that day rehearsing, and Machito's wife went up to Machito and said that she had to go to the store. She forgot something, but the baby doesn't want to eat. So they had to stop practicing and go up to the kitchen, and he had to feed the baby while she goes to the store. So they went up, and he was a little bit upset. My father said, "No, cálmate, no, lo grabamos más tarde, lo hacemos más tarde." And he said that his daughter didn't want to eat. So as musicians, what does Machito do? He takes the spoon of the soup and he gets, "Tiene que tomarte una sopa de pichón." And the baby starts eating. And my father said, "Hey, eso suena." And then I heard a few days later, they got the group together, went into the recording studio and recorded the song. This is before I was born. Wow. And so I grew up with this. So to answer it's a long answer to your question. We are Latinos. We understand this culture. There are memories that we have that other people are not going to have. There are experiences, which is the first word that I say, that other people are not going to be able to have and will not be able to cherish. That being said, do you know how many Latinos I know who don't dance, don't speak Spanish, and don't care? So culture is just an experience, and I think it's very important to take care of that word. It's a cultural experience for me.
I really like your description, cultural experience. Yeah, very, very important. Oh, thank you. I could listen to you for hours, but maybe we do another interview later on for my PhD.
My pleasure.
Because
did I answer all of your questions?
Yes, it's basically your views. It's, I'm just interested. I've interviewed you, Frankie Martinez, Tito Hortos, Eddie Torres. I have two more to go. Where is it the interview? Maria Torres. No, Maria Torres, his wife, Maria Torres O'Connor. Yeah, and some other people from England. And I'm just very interested in what you guys think, how you perceive this amazing dance and music that we're all, that is our lives in a way.
Are you interviewing only dancers or musicians as well?
Musicians as well. So I'm interviewing Joaquin Ortega from Tamboranga, Orlando Ortiz from New Swing Sextet, another Cuban musician that I work with, David Labrada. Yeah, I mean, I'm interviewing as many people as possible. I'm really interested in the view. I've interviewed a lot of people in the past that are non-Latinos. So I know how they feel and think that they didn't grow up in a Latin culture, because I've been working in all over Europe, especially for 30 years. So I'm very interested in how the people of Latin origin or the teachers and musicians that have been playing this kind of music for a long time, was their experience and their opinion. For example, Tito Hortos said to me that he believes that part of the reason why people didn't connect to the music so much from the beginning is their fault, because they were called to teach abroad. They were really young, they had no idea what they were doing, they didn't know how to teach. So the first times that they went to Italy, they were just whatever, teaching, and then the money, the financial gains. It's like also for Latinos, is coming round. A lot of Latinos teaching salsa not necessarily had the respect and understanding of how important was what they were doing in terms of passing the culture. They didn't understand it. So I realized talking to them, how interesting. And Eddie Torres also, he said to me, I think I shouldn't have taught with the count. It was a mistake. And I know it served its purpose, but now I don't want to teach with count anymore, because a lot of people don't go to feel what I feel when I dance, which is, the and so it's so interesting to hear people that I know for 20 years or more, how their discourse and ideas have changed over the years, like mine have changed as well. So it's nice to see how we've all matured and can view, because salsa, kizomba, bachata, all of it has become such an international phenomenon. So the last question I can ask you, actually, I am very interested, and the reason why I'm doing this master's and this PhD is to bring salsa to academic level, Afro-Latin dance and music, period, not just salsa. I feel that, personally, it needs academic recognition, because it will give the dancers another level of support, financial support, grants, funding, and also bring something that is not of white colonialism, and which is all ballet and contemporary, all these dances, that are white supremacy, led. So I believe that. Do you think it's important to bring Afro-Latin dance and music to academic level?
I think it would be invaluable to do that for several reasons. Number one, that I think that it would provide a level of authenticity for those who are in the teaching realm. We're teachers. We're teaching for a long time. I also teach Spanish at a high school, so I have a degree in being able to teach. I teach at a music academy as well, so I'm involved in all aspects of the teaching, the dance, the music, the art. And as you know, I'm doing my film, so I teach in the acting realm as well. And I think that it would be fantastic to bring that to an academic level. That being said, there are also dangers with that, as well as with anything. For example, I think one of the greatest dangers that you will face, or anybody will face, is the whole peer-reviewed. As you know, you're going for your master's, so you can't write a paper without it being peer-reviewed. You have to only do peer-reviewed sources. And I'm sorry, but when I'm writing a paper for my PhD and I only have to do peer-reviewed, I just feel like I'm reading stuff from stuffy people who are just arrogant people who are just part of a crowd and got a certificate, and it's only us. And I don't get the real answers. The real answers come from watching a YouTube video of somebody who has obsessive compulsive disorder, reading a comment from somebody who has dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality disorder. The real knowledge is learning from family members or friends of family members who have borderline personality disorder or bipolar disorder. That is real. Reading a peer-reviewed source of somebody who has been ethically interviewed, but being ethically interviewed means you can't mention certain things, you can't do certain things, so you're not really getting the essence. That's why when Pacheco came out with that song, La Esencia del Guaguancó, that was a battle that he did. It was an attack on Arsenio Rodriguez because of their fight that was going on. There's an article about that. I heard that first story. So I think there's an essence to making sure that, and it's impossible to do, but once you get into the academic level, guess what? You're going to get PhDs, and here's your first question. You're going to get PhDs who are not Latinos, who are teaching this, and then you're going to get the Latinos coming in and saying, why do I have to learn Afro-Cuban music or Afro-Latin music from this black man or this Jewish man or this Korean man or this white man or this Latino who's never been to Cuba? That's what's going to happen. So I do think it's very important for it to get to the academic level for everybody, even the bad people, even the bad apples, because you can't help it. So it really depends on what your motive is, but I think it's important to know your heart is in the right place, but there's a negativity that will happen.
I guess that happens anyway in all realms. That's why I'm doing a research PhD. I'm interested in researching salsa outside, and part of, there is a lot of research in salsa psychology, for example, the history, sociology, politics, but not about the embodiment of music, not about how people perceive the dance itself. Why is the phenomenon that it is? And I don't think, I was talking about this with Maria Torres. She also is trying to put salsa in university in New York, but the problem is that how do we put the syllabus together when the Latinos cannot even agree among themselves? So that's why when I'm researching with my teaching system. So I'm not saying, even in my PhD, I'm seeing the somatic. Is there a somatic value of applying somatic practices to my teaching system? But I'm not saying that is to salsa in general, because I don't think I can do that, because I don't have, even though I've been studying all my life, I don't have enough knowledge or experience to say this would apply to all styles. So I'm only doing I'm only doing it in what I know. And I think it's important to start somewhere. So maybe someone else comes after me in England and decides to do a master's on, I don't know, for example, this girl, a Cuban girl, she did a master's in whether she could apply contact improvisation to salsa, to Cuban salsa, because she was Cuban. Then, another girl I know, she did a master's on learning to dance on two because she had never done it. And they don't know, what I've realized being at university is that they don't even know what salsa is. They don't even consider it. Like most of the dancers that I'm teachers, who are contemporary dancers and ballet dancers, and I'm talking about the biggest school in London. This is a very important school internationally, Trinity Laban. They don't even know. They think of salsa and they think of some kind of commercial, red dress and fast music. They don't know anything. So I see it as an opportunity to educate them and to say, you know, we're a minority here in the UK, Latinos. We're here, you know, we count. We are of value. We need to be listened at different levels, because otherwise we have no voice. If we don't go, I think the PhD, what it does, and you're about to do one, so you know, it gives you a voice. It gives you a voice. You can be heard in certain areas, ámbitos, that you wouldn't be heard otherwise. So if I have a PhD, having researched salsa and somatics, I can maybe put a company together and get funding for it. If I don't, I won't. Or I can bring a module. I think, for example, that it would be super valuable for contemporary dancers to have a modules in Afro-Latin dances and music. So it doesn't have to be taught by me, you know, it's just opening that door. And then we can bring someone very knowledgeable in Afro-Cuban to do that, like we do with African dance and with hip hop. So I'm just trying to facilitate for the future generations, you know, to have a voice and really improve standards. I don't know. It might make people want to study more. It might make people want to go like, you know, oh no, I just can't teach with 4 classes under my belt. I mean, some of my students want to be teachers and they're starting to work for other people. And you know how salsa world is. It's very easy for the culture and the dance and the music to be passed on wrong, because there aren't enough. So I'm hoping that by making all this effort that I'm making, I'll somehow open the door for awareness in the academic sector. Like they really know nothing at all. When they read my proposal for the master, my supervisors were like, oh my God, we didn't know the word salsa, you know, it's a mixture of everything. They had no clue, like literally. So I feel it like a way of educating them, educating myself, because all I know is I don't know anything, the more I study, and then open the door for especially funding, because there's so much funding here for dancers, you know, and projects, and we don't access them. We can't. Salsa teachers, we're outside that. We are not even considered. I mean, dancers, I got into this school because I'm a professional ballet dancer. And I'm, you know, and I went to proper dance school. Otherwise I wouldn't have got in, you know? So I think, yeah. And if not, I've enjoyed it. If it doesn't do anything, I've enjoyed it.
That's why I said your heart is in the right place, and I think it's invaluable. That's my first answer, is that it is invaluable, and I think it would be extremely important and give a layer or margin of authenticity to everybody who is involved. Of course, it will always become political at some point, but I think it's a wonderful journey to undertake. I congratulate you. I think it's very well deserved. Like you said, we're like-minded. I'm doing my PhD for one and only reason, is to have an authenticity to my novels, have authenticity to my films. And that's important to me. That's, you know, people hear me now because I have La Época, because of my father. And that's why I did La Época. It's because Chuito Valdez, he passed away a long time ago, and Cachao gave me the same advice. And Cuban Pete as well, the dancer. They gave me
I
the
used to
same
work
advice.
with him for years.
Yeah, there you go.
When
So
I lived in Miami,
in,
I worked for him without even knowing who he was at the beginning. And then I found out, and we used to teach for him, perform for him, you know, dance together. Crazy.
That's great.
Barbara.
That's great. So yeah, he was all 3 of them, Cachao and Pete, at the same time in Florida at Barbara Craddock's place in Miami Beach. Gave me the same advice, that that La Época is the authority, that I didn't need to go to a university to have La Época authenticated by a university, because they wouldn't know how to do that.
Exactly.
And Chuito Valdez, he just told me straight, and he says, no tienes, él tuvo cáncer, so no tenía una voz, hablaba así, tú tienes que hacer esto. So él me dijo, no tienes que decir ninguna palabra acerca de la época en ese tiempo estaba viviendo en los Estados Unidos, porque la época andará adelante y abrirá muchas puertas para ti internacionalmente. And that came true. It opened so many doors for me. That's why I live in Europe. It's because of that. And he told me, you're teaching these films that you're doing. There are many, me digo, hay muchos músicos latinos que tendrán muchos celos porque tú estás enseñando cosas que ellos deben saber y ellos deben estar haciendo, pero no lo hacen. And I just kept always humble. And the last story I'll tell you, when I created La Época, it all started at Tito Puente's funeral in the year 2000.
Yeah.
And I was sitting at the table. Did you go to the funeral?
Not to the funeral, no, but I was in Puerto Rico. He was supposed to play, and he died a few days before the Congress, and we did like a memorial at the Congress in Puerto Rico.
Yes. So I'm sitting there, and we're in New York, and we're at this big table, and I'm here. My father's sitting here. Cachao's sitting here. Celia Cruz is sitting here, and Tony Bennett is sitting right across from me. You know, wow. Tony Bennett, Italian singer. Yeah, and Xiomara Alfaro, Rafael Benitez, Mangual, I believe Mangual was there. And I was still young. I was 22. Tito Puente was just an uncle to me. I didn't think of him as anybody famous. Celia Cruz, never thought of her anybody except aunt, just part of the family. And Tony Bennett, didn't even know who he was, didn't care who he was. It was just, I was just with my father and his friends. And Tony Bennett, this Italian, with the Italian, the mafioso way. And he just sits and he says, with his finger, he says, you know who you are? And I just, it was one of those moments where you kind of sink into your seat, like, were you talking to me? And I didn't say anything. And my father says, contéstalo, no le falta respeto. And I said, I'm my father's son. And he says, no, you're all of our son. He says, in 15 years, we're not going to be here. What are you going to do about it? That's all he said to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was very heavy. So, we drove home, and for days I couldn't talk. And then the idea came to me. I was like, the movie where Palladium, where Mambo was king. You've probably seen that documentary. This is after Buena Vista Social Club. And I watched those movies and I said, I know all of those people. Like, this is it. I mean, that's the movie. That's the interview. That's what they're talking about. And the Palladium or Mambo's king, why are they spending so much time on Tito Rodriguez and Tito Puente and their feud? They spent 20 minutes on that feud. It could have been talked about in 3 minutes. There's so much more to talk about. Why isn't Luis Mangual in it? Why isn't Chiripa in it? Why isn't Agustin Caraballoso in it? Why isn't Charlie Rodriguez or Yomo Toro in these movies? I'm like, this is insane. So I realized these producers, they had their favorites and they only wanted to get their favorites. So I'm thinking about this, and I went to my father's phone book, and I opened the phone book, and I'm looking at Johnny Pacheco's phone number, Celia Cruz's number, the wife of Ray Barreto. And I'm like, oh my, journalists would pay so much money to have these phone numbers. So I said, ding, ding, ding. I got everything. I got the camera. I got the lights. I got everything I need. Let me do these interviews. Let me meet these people from an inside perspective. And that's what I started to do. I started to do these interviews, all from Tito Puente's funeral. And then I got the idea. One more minute. And I said to my father, and I said, Papá, yo quiero hacer una película. And he crosses his hands like this. He says, ¿de qué? And I said, bueno, quiero hacer una entrevistas con tus amigos, los bailarines y los músicos, y quién conoció a quién grabó con quién. And he just had 2 words for me. He just said, ten cuidado.
Oh, wow.
And I said, ten cuidado con qué? And he says, tú sabes, ten cuidado. But I didn't really know, in my mind, I thought he meant what he always meant. No le falta respeto. That's what I thought he meant. So 8 years later, the movie's done. I go down to Miami to show the movie. I had to show the movie to Cuban Pete and to Cachao. That was the priority for me. So I'm there, and I'm at Barbara's house, and Cachao is sitting on the sofa next to me. Cuban Pete is over here, and they're watching the movie with their eyes wide open. You know, Cachao, he was old. You know, he should be sleeping. He didn't sleep 1 second. He was just open like this, and at the end of the movie, he's got tears in his eyes, and he looks at me and he says, he takes his glasses off and he says, "Hijo, ten cuidado." And I said, ¿Qué vaina es esta vaina? I said, Cachao, mi papá me dijo lo mismo. ¿Y qué quiere decir esto? ¿Qué significa esto? And he said, "What? Hijo." He always called me hijo. He said, "Hijo, se lo dije a tu papá cuando él tenía tu edad y te lo digo a ti. Ten cuidado, mantenga tu humildad, porque las mismas personas que tú ves en tu subir serán las mismas personas que estarán ahí para verte en tu caída." And I learned from that moment to stay humble. And that's what I did. So to answer your question, I think it would be extremely important to go in the academic level, because like what I did, it brings an entire level of authenticity to what you do. Nobody would know my films unless I kept my voice out and had those famous people say my words, say what I wanted them to say, which was exactly what they wanted to say. Simple. So I think it provides a lot of authenticity, and I say that with
To share
experience.
more of your stories. Yeah, I wanna do more of this. I'm documenting as well different dancers' lives, because you know, like for example, in my professional dance world, there are a lot of books. All the dancers and researchers they write together. You know, they in one book you have a lot of articles and interviews, and I'm doing the same for salsa. So
It's wonderful.
yeah, I think it's super important, because this is something, like you say, I'm the same as you. Everything I do is not for fame or recognition. You know, I've had my fame as a dancer and recognition. It's not something that interests me. For me, it's about, we've been given this gift and this opportunity to be part of, you know, this amazing world. What do I do with it for the future? You know, what do we leave behind? Who do we protect? I think it's ridiculous that people like Stacy Lopez or Eddie Torres don't have a book. You know, that a lot of what they said gets washed down and lost in classes. I'm writing a book as well as for my abuela. She had an incredible life, and I used to interview her for years, because I feel my mom, I come from a family of writers, that's why I write songs, and my mom also writes stories of the family. I think if we don't, they get lost when people die. And you know, nowadays, for example, in England, a lot of people don't even know who Eddie Torres is, let alone other people that are not, you know, young and famous.
Yeah, the newer dancers, the newer generation, they have no idea.
No idea, you know, and I feel like, oh my God, no, we need to document more. We need to document more. Even now, for example, someone is doing a documentary of salsa in the UK. They didn't call me. I'm like, I felt really bad, because I feel like it's not for ego reasons, but I'm one of the pioneers. And if they didn't call me, that I'm known under every corner,
Yeah,
who else they didn't call? So what is
exactly. You feel like a dinosaur.
about who is this documentary? That the people that are, like, not only me, I also found out that other of the pioneers haven't been called. So how are you doing a documentary about the history of salsa in the UK when people are not being called?
That's correct.
So I decided to start doing this myself with no budget, because I have no money. But I'm hoping that when I finish my master's, I can ask for funding for these projects.
That's great.
Yeah, so that's a hope, you know, so that we can do these projects, because otherwise financing everything ourselves is difficult.
Yeah, where are you from originally?
Argentina.
Argentina. I can't remember her name. I believe her last name is Flores. I think her name is Aurora Flores. You know who that is?
No,
She's from New York. She's the historian.
no,
Uh,
I know her, but I want to know her. Aurora Flores.
uh,
Para escribir.
I believe that's her name, Aurora Flores. She's from Puerto Rico. I'm not a big. I kind of keep my distance from her because you can't have a conversation with her without it turning around about Puerto Rico. She's obsessed with Puerto Rico. You know, she probably thinks that Puerto Rico, you know, I don't know, won the war in Ukraine or something like that. I mean, she's obsessed, but she's very knowledgeable, and she is very helpful. Luis Mangual, if you have not interviewed him, he's from the Palladium. He was Johnny Pacheco's bongocero.
But
He's
how do
in
I
my
get
movie.
in touch with these people?
Luis Mangual is on my Facebook, so you can connect with him. You can easily let him know that that you spoke to me. Who else would you should contact? I think it would be he's not Latino, but I think you probably already know who he is. He's a very funny person, and he's got a lot of knowledge about DC. Earl Rush, you know Earl Rush from DC?
No,
What? You don't know Earl Rush?
or no.
Wow, he's not Latino. He's Black American, but he's a professional dancer. He's actually a tap dancer. He's a professional tap dancer, but he's the main organizer for all of the events in DC.
Oh,
So
no,
he
I'm
does
gonna
a lot of
contact
work.
him.
He's a fan of Lipo. He's on my Facebook as well. I think another person for you to connect with would be Aurora Flores, Luis Mangual, Earl Rush. And I think that it would be good for you to connect with, what's his name? Angelo Prieto from
Okay.
Chicago. He's a DJ there. He's like yourself. He's one of the original Chicago pioneers. He's of Cuban descent. Very funny person, very serious about what he does. He does a lot of events there. So those are 4 contacts that I think would be very valuable for you to connect with,
No,
especially Luis Mangual. He's in my movie. I don't know that he's doing interviews anymore, but you can at least ask. Oh, Abraham Rodriguez. You probably know Abraham Rodriguez.
no.
Oh, you know his music. You know the song that is ven, Iroko, ven, ba 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 ba, ven, Iroko. Yeah, great Son Montuno. He's on my Facebook as well. He's in my part 4 movie. No,
You know
yeah,
that I can't open your
he's in part
movies.
4. I'm sorry?
I can't open them. The link you send me, I can't open them.
Why are you using your phone or your computer?
No computer.
They work. I don't know why. You mean you can't download it?
Yeah, I can't watch them, basically.
You download it, but you can't watch it.
Mhm.
Are you using a PC or a Mac?
A Mac. Do you think that's
Oh,
a problem?
why. Yeah, you have to download you have to download the codec to be. The instructions came in the email. If you got
Yeah,
an
but I
email,
can't do that. Maybe my Mac is too old. I was gonna ask you because yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna download them on my son's computer. Could you check?
yeah,
Can you send me the 4
everybody downloads.
parts? Like, make sure that you send me everything because I need to watch them all.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'll send you the links. And nobody's complained about them.
Yeah,
The
I
only
also,
complaints
because
that
I've
we
been
get are
trying
from.
to, you know, I've seen bits and pieces on YouTube only, and I have your name and you're in my part of my references for my master's because I talk about your film and I don't know why I can't watch it, so I definitely want to. So if you can send me that, that would be really, really good.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, you should be able to open them.
What you're doing is so valuable, incredible. Plus all the
Thank
stories
you.
you have, you need to write them down. You need to write a book about your stories and all those
Oh, well, you know,
things that you
I've
experience
got
at
plenty of
home.
stories. Yeah.
It's very
I got plenty
important,
of
you know, to pass them down, to have them recorded for the future.
Absolutely. Well, that's why I did the movies, is to have some of these amazing stories in. Yeah. So yeah, you got those names. I gave you those names. I think it would be very.
Thank you so much. And do you think anyone in Europe that you think I should, someone passionate that is really passionate
In
about
Europe?
Eh? Yes, that is
In
not
Europe?
Latino, but it's doing a really good job at passing salsa on and Latin culture.
I know so many pasionistas. I think that, you know what?
Yeah.
You're gonna laugh when I say this name,
Well,
and you're gonna be like, "Why in the world would I interview him?" But Cuenda Lima, he's from Kizomba. I'm sure you know Cuenda Lima, yes?
it sounds familiar, but I don't know much Kizomba.
Well, if you're in London, if you're from the London area, he is the pioneer of Kizomba in London. He
It
comes
is the
from the
Brito
south. I'm sorry?
pioneer. It is the Brito was pioneer here.
Yes, and he was also part of that. He was also part
Yeah,
of that.
she's
That
the one that brought it.
same.
Yeah,
Yep, he was part of the same crowd. He is so much respect for the Afro-Cuban music. I interviewed him for my Kizomba movie, and you might not think his information would be valuable because he's from Kizomba, but he used to dance salsa. He has that, but I think it would be valuable to interview him because if you know what he's done, he quit Kizomba about 2 or 3 years ago because of what happened with urban kids and the whole crazy energy with urban kids and everything else. And he does his own thing, but he's very well respected. I interviewed him for my film. He's not passionate about Afro-Cuban music. No. But he's passionate about culture. He's passionate about authenticity, and he's passionate about respect. And I think that for you, in my opinion, to make sure that you have, in my opinion, this is my take, to have some authenticity from people outside of the Latino culture, from different dance genres, go to Kizomba, because they're the most kindest, open-minded people who will say, you know what? We have a lot of dancers Latinos who are dancing Kizomba. And where does merengue? Merengue is a cousin of Zouk. Samba is a cousin of Zouk. So Zouk was dancing Martinique in Guadeloupe.
Yeah.
So they're all connected. I'll send you my Kizomba movie so you can see that connection.
Yes, please.
I think it would be
I used
very.
to dance Zouk in Paris. Paris is so huge, the Zouk scene.
Yes, absolutely, and it's a cousin. So I think he would be. You may not agree, but I think it would be very good.
Yes, I agree. I believe that so many people would be valuable, and I want to listen to everybody. Obviously, I have a limit in how many people I can interview, but for me, the more the merrier, because the ones I might not interview now, I might interview for my PhD. And also for the PhD, I have collaborators. So I'm so excited I'm going to New York for a month and to Puerto Rico for a month and to Cuba. And I have some collaborators from London as well that will, people that will do a bit more than just do an interview. Obviously, I cannot ask this to so many people because I want people have their lives and they don't have time. Yeah, that's something that we can discuss in the future if you are interested in any way, shape, or form.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
I want to have input from all these people. Like, for example, I'm going to go to Puerto Rico and take classes, watch people dance, interview students. The same in New York. There isn't much research. If you wanna do a PhD on something else, even psychology, like there's so much research, so many books. There's so much to read. Like I'm full of books in my house. I have so much about somatic practices, about dancing, about music, but about salsa, there's nothing. So I have to go in comparison. There's nothing. There's a lot, but there's nothing in comparison. So I have to use what is called, personal communication. So interviews, working together, going to class, having chats, filming, interviewing people that are not dancers, like I need, instead of the books, I need this source.
Absolutely.
So definitely I will contact you again because, I've been wanting to work with you for a long time. It's just that pandemic and the whole situation made it very difficult. I had to close my academy and I haven't reopened. But I have a salsa band. I'm
That's great.
gonna just play gigs and teach 2 classes a week. That's it for me. Yeah, you're definitely anything that you're doing that I would love to see. I think it's amazing all the time and effort that you dedicate to passing on the culture through movies. It's crazy. It's amazing. And you film
No,
yourself.
thank you. I thought, no, congratulations to you on what you're doing. And in terms of me, I couldn't sit still, and I had so much to share. And I just thought it was a beautiful gesture to do. And, you know, I can give you one last story. You have 2 minutes?
Yeah, yeah.
It's one of the most beautiful stories of my career. It's one of the first stories of my career. When I started La Época, I told you about Tito Puente's funeral. When I started La Época, I didn't really know what I was doing in terms of why. I knew my inspiration. My inspiration was to know more about who played with whom. I just thought it was exciting. That was my original concept. Boring, but it was still my original concept. Oh, wow. Who did Tito Puente work with? Who did Cachao work with? Who did Celia Cruz work with? Who did Richie Ray work with? Who did, you know, all of them. That was my original. And then I started getting into the dancing and so forth. So as I was getting into the film, I filmed, I watched Cachao, got all of this. I still didn't know what my film would do. And I learned that in Philadelphia. I presented my film at Temple University. Earl Rush's friend, George Dennis, is the one who organized it. I gave you Earl Rush's name.
Yeah.
So he had me in Philadelphia. This is the year 2008. It was my first time in Philly. And we present the film at this Temple University. There were so many dancers there, people. It was either Temple or UPenn. Maybe it was UPenn. I'm sorry, it was UPenn. And there were so many dancers. The whole auditorium was filled, so many that you couldn't even fit anymore. They had to stand on the walls. I had no idea that there were that many dancers there, young and old, not just festival dancers. I'm talking the Jews, you know, the Jewish people, the old Puerto Ricans. They were first in line. They were standing. They didn't know George. They just heard about the Palladium, and they were like, you know, so they come and they sit, and I always loved to sit in the back, in the middle, so I can hear all the people laughing at the certain parts of the film, especially my father talking in the movie about, we played a mambo for an hour, you know, and I love to hear people laughing. Then the end of the film comes, and I'm signing autographs. I do the Q&A, and everybody's leaving, but way up in the top seat of the bleachers, there was a really old man. He was just sitting there, and there's a young, beautiful lady sitting next to him. So my first thought was, you know, wow, the old man, you know, going with the young ladies, you know, I guess he's got that power going. And then he has a cane, and he takes the cane, and he's shaking like this, and he starts to stand up, and the girl helps him. So I said, oh, maybe that's his nurse, maybe that's his granddaughter. I have to change my approach. So he starts to make his way down the stairs, and she's very slowly with him. They're not talking. She's slowly, and this is a very beautiful, beautiful woman, very young, must have been in her 20s, elegant, and Latina, and making her way down. And as he's getting close to me, his face is flush red. So I said to George, I said, I think he's been drinking. This guy must be drunk. You know, could you just stand here and make sure nothing happens? But as he gets closer, I don't smell any alcohol. And I'm like, what is this? And he just comes up to me, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he says, thank you. And I said, you're welcome. He goes, thank you. And I said, you're very welcome. He goes, you young people, you don't listen. Listen. So I was like, whoa. So I listened. And he says, now I know who Arsenio Rodriguez was. And I said, well, I'm so glad, because I dedicated 25 minutes of my first movie to Arsenio. And I said, I'm so glad. He goes, you people, listen. And he just yelled, listen. So I was like, okay, and I listened. One of the most beautiful stories of my career. He told me, you know who Arsenio Rodriguez was?
Yeah.
Yes, he told me, 1958. It was every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that the Palladium was doing Latin night, and every night of the week they had 3, 4, or 5 bands competing. Puente, Rodriguez, Machito, Benny More would, coming from Mexico sometime. They would all try to outdo each other. And it was later on that Pacheco formed his own orchestra. But in the beginning, Pacheco was part of the other orchestras. So they were trying to outcompete. Everybody was doing it. And that's how my father got involved, because he was with Arsenio's orchestra. So he was playing for all of them. So he says, 1958, I was dancing at the Palladium every night of the week that there was Latin night, Thursday, Friday. And my wife, after a few years, she asked for a divorce because she was sure that I was, having another woman outside. And I kept telling her, I'm just going dancing. There is no woman. But she refused to believe it. And I've heard this story many times from other people. So he says, but I was smart one day. I said it was her birthday, and I decided to take her to the Palladium for her birthday. And he says, you young men, you don't know this trick, but never, ever try to surprise a woman. It will never, ever work. But he says, I did. I broke the rule. I surprised my wife, and I took her to the Palladium. And she says, it was her birthday. It was my birthday gift to show her what I'm doing, that I am not with another woman. So I'm listening to the story like, what's the point? I've heard this a million times. And then he says, that night, there was a black man playing. And I'm telling you, I've heard him perform before, but that night, it was unbelievable. I was so lucky that he was passing through the crowd with somebody who's helping him because he was blind. And I just reached out and grabbed his hand, and I said, sir, this is my wife's birthday. We heard you play, but Arsenio didn't speak the best English. So all he heard was birthday. And he goes, oh, feliz cumpleaños, cumpleaños. And he goes on his way, and he think that was it. And then he gets back on the stage and he's playing a couple of songs. And then he tells me after the second song, everything goes silent. And then they hear, bam, 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 cumpleaños feliz, tum, cumpleaños feliz, tum, cumpleaños feliz, cumpleaños feliz. And they had the whole Palladium, the people that were singing happy birthday. They didn't know who they were singing it for. And he just felt, wow, this is amazing. And then he tells me that night, driving home, they got into a car accident and his wife died. And he never knew who that man was until he saw my movie. So this story touched me so much. I have the chills. This story touched me so much. It was at that moment that I know that God spoke to me and said, my son, this is why you have done La Época. It is to bring closure to those who are still alive and will die soon, to give authenticity, to give a recognition, and to remind them that they matter, that their experiences matter. And that was the day that it was sealed for me. I knew why I had to do La Época, and I knew what it was for. That's my inspiration.
Wow, it's an amazing story. Poor woman. Horrible.
Yeah, horrible, but beautiful story, and I don't know, I have a picture with the man, but I'm so glad that he got closure, before he passed away. It's beautiful.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all this. It's amazing. I'm going to reach out to you again because, like I said, I could listen to you for hours. Very interesting. And I have so many more questions, but I'm going to leave them for the next time because then I have like personal curiosities. I have nothing to do with my master's. But I'll reach out to you for that another day. Oh, well, thank you so, so much. It's 7 o'clock here. I'm going to finish. Thank you so much for your time. Really value your time. And I'm not going to put this interview anywhere. I'm just transcribing parts of it. I'm transcribing for my master's, but only parts of it.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
keeping
you
it
very
confidential.
much.
Thank you so much.
So talk soon. Get better.
All right. Estaremos. Muchísimas gracias. Chao pues.
Pronto la pierna esa. Gracias.
Muchas
Adiós.
gracias. Chao. Chao, chao.